Welcome to the Attractions Group podcast. This is episode 75. I'm Ryan Sir, along with Don Helbig. Don, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, Ryan. Looking forward at the end of the month to heading to San Antonio, Texas, getting away from the cold here that we have in the tri-state area, and it's the American Coaster Enthusiast Winterfest event, the bigger off-season events that the club has, and I'm going to have a chance to be a presenter at it. So really excited about that.
You said that's in San Antonio?
In San Antonio, it's going to be at SeaWorld this year.
Oh, that's cool. That seems like that'll be a pretty warm place to be. I know it gets kind of cold in San Antonio in the winter occasionally, but here's to you doing that. That's really cool. So safe travels to you. Um, s-
Yeah, I'll take the 60s over the 20s that it's going to be here.
yeah, it's been trying to snow, but it hasn't successfully been able to snow yet this season. But so fingers crossed that it doesn't, because I hate snow. But yeah, so for those of you who are listening, welcome. You can listen to us on all your favorite podcast apps: Apple, Google, Spotify. You know the drill. If you're watching on YouTube, thank you. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, leave us a comment, and tell a friend. We'd love to have them here. Don, what do you want to talk about today?
Well, Ryan, it's just shy of 4 years since COVID hit and really impacted how the theme park industry operates. And one of the most impacted was Walt Disney World in Orlando. So there's been, as everyone knows, it's changed the way you had to visit the parks. You had to get the reservations and different things like that. But starting this week, things for the first time since 2020 getting back to normal there, where you no longer have to make reservations. And I know you, as an annual pass holder, you have to be very excited about that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be honest with you, the changes didn't really affect me personally that much because I hopped onto the annual pass thing about 6 months ago. So a lot of people compare it to the situation now or the situation that we're into the past. But for me, this is the world I've known for being an annual pass holder. But the thing that excites me the most is that it's one of the last little inklings of that terrible year with that terrible virus and those terrible memories. um, so I'm happy for it in that regard, more so than anything else.
Well, how do you think these changes at Walt Disney World, removing the park reservations, the return of the Disney dining plan, uh, for just literally, I mean, millions of guests, we can say, how do you feel that's going to impact their flexibility during their trips?
I mean, I think it's gonna have a huge amount of flexibility added to the trips. I mean, to be honest with you, if you understand the reservation system, it really wasn't that bad, especially with my experience starting with Midsummer, because essentially the way that it worked was you had to have a reservation, and then you could go to that park, and then after 2 o'clock, you could hop to another park. So little caveats with that. So I couldn't make a reservation at like another park and then go to like I couldn't make a reservation at Epcot and then show up at Animal Kingdom after two. I'd have to stop at the park where I had a reservation. So little things that probably made sense on paper, but to explain it to somebody, it sounds like insane. But I think that if anything, it's gonna take away a lot of the confusion that's associated with it, especially because for individual tickets, they no longer require reservations whatsoever. So if you have tickets, you can go to Disney World, and I think that that's something that is long overdue. And if you have a ticket, it's hard enough dealing with your Genie Pluses as well as the reservations and the whole like Disney industrial complex, shall we say, that you're dealing with while going on a vacation there. The reservations were more or less meaningless toward the end, especially in the past 6 months or so. So I think that just removing that layer of confusion is going to be the biggest impact of all of it.
All right, let's talk about the significance of the park hopper, that ticket add-on. Um, how does it enhance the experience for visitors exploring multiple parks in a single day?
Well, I mean, it's if you're going to visit more than one park, you have to have it first of all. But park hopping is part of the fun when it comes to Disney World. I mean, there are some parks where you kind of have to dedicate a day. I would say like Magic Kingdom, there's enough to do that you can't really do a half day there. But if you're not gonna do every single little thing in the park at, say, Animal Kingdom, you can go there, especially if you get there early, and you can hit up, your avatars and your Expedition Everest and stuff like that. And if you don't wanna spend a lot of time looking at, like, the zoo-like attractions, then, hop on Disney Transportation or hop in your car and go to a different park. I mean, every park has its own personality.
What's your favorite form of transit to get to these different parks when you're doing the hopping?
So, there it's funny you ask. I normally we drive. We just hop in the car and we drive, mainly because if you let's say you start at Epcot and then you ride the monorail over to Magic Kingdom and then you stay there till 11, you've got to ride the monorail all the way back to Epcot to get to your car. But as far as like the neat stuff is concerned, I have different respects for these things on different levels. So when I took Erin there, for her first ever visit to Magic Kingdom, I did what my friend Todd did for me, in which nobody wants to ride those boats. It's if you wanna get to the park or back from the park, it's, like, such a pain in the butt, but at least once, everybody has to have that experience of, hopping on the boat and cresting the turn, and you can finally see the castle, and the castle's getting bigger. So I made sure that she had that experience with our first visit to Magic Kingdom. So I like that for that regard. I like the monorail because it's a cute interpretation of what like 1998 was going to look like when they built it. I would say they were wrong. And then there's the Skyliner, which I'm intrigued by the idea of the Skyliner, but the one time I did ride it, it kept stopping, and when it stops, like, it's designed so when it moves, the airflow comes through it, but it wasn't that hot when we were riding it, it was, like, 75 degrees or so, but when it stopped after a couple minutes, like, the temperature started to rise. So I've always been kind of paranoid about putting a lot of stock into that, but I do like having it as an option.
Yeah, I like the sky. I think when I normally I would stay on property, so I'm not driving to park in their parking lot. So I like taking the bus, to go to the different parks and then just being able to do it that way. I think it's the most convenient way to do it.
Yeah.
Depending on what time you're trying to hop to, you can hit in that busy traffic times too, if it's early in the morning or it's late in the day. But the buses are always good for me. I don't mind the monorail, but I do recommend, like you said, if it's your first time going to Magic Kingdom, take the ferry boat.
Yeah, I agree. Now I will say I should caveat when we rode the Skyliner, it stopped several. We took it from Epcot, so it's in like the UK pavilion and the Epcot, like that kind of area, and we took it over to Hollywood Studios, and it stopped several times, and we had the issue that I mentioned. But on the way back, it broke down, so we had to take the bus back. So, the Skyliner's cool though. Like, don't get me wrong, it like looks really cool, and I love how they have the graphics on it and stuff. But reliability's sake, is just not quite there yet. But yeah, yeah, the Skyliner is a neat concept. I wish they would.
I like look. Yeah, go ahead.
No, no, I wish they would have something that would cover more ground that you could get from Animal Kingdom to Magic Kingdom or whatever. But the original idea, I believe, was the monorail. But the monorail is like I saw some YouTube video where it's like $30 million a mile to build or something like absorbent like that. But um maybe the Skyliner, as they perfect it more and more, may be a better solution to cover more resorts and more parks and stuff.
On the buses, you get the TV monitor, so you get to see, different Disney clips and things to do while you're visiting the park. I like looking at the different ads they have inside the bus, going down promoting what's happening. But that's always my go-to would be the buses, just because I'm familiar with it, easy to do, and like I said, you get those videos and that. Let's talk about one of your favorite things, dining plans. Can you explain the two prepaid meal plan options for Walt Disney World guests, including the quick service dining plan and the standard Disney dining plan? How are they different?
Yeah, so I've actually never had the dining plan. As an annual pass holder, they've got their own deal with that, and I'm not going to get too much into that. But so nowadays they've got the dining plan was reintroduced, and it's for people that have booked reservations for stays starting January 9th. So by the time you're listening to this, it's already a deal. Um, There's a quick service option where you can get 1 entree, 1 non-alcoholic beverage at breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then there's a table service one. This is a little bit more complicated. You can get 1 entree and 1 non-alcoholic beverage, or so I should say, I put in my notes, or alcoholic beverage if you're 21 or older. So alcohol actually is covered, which is kind of interesting. Or you can get 1 buffet or family style meal and a beverage. Uh, and then there's a brunch option where you can get an entree, a dessert, and a beverage, or you can get a buffet for brunch. And that's a good deal. The brunches are like $80 there nowadays sometimes.
Yeah, that is a good deal. Look at Walt Disney World, just hundreds of thousands of cast members working there. In the last, like I said, we're just shy of 4 years, from COVID, kind of shutting down the park and then implementing all these changes. So a lot of turnover at Walt Disney World. So a lot of these cast members, the only thing that they know, the only world they've lived in, were all those things that were implemented and in place since COVID, with the reservations. That's what they've learned and how to explain all of those kind of things. Annual pass holders, you're new in the last year with that. That's what you knew. Let's talk about change. People don't like change. Even though it's going back to the way it was, how's that going to impact everybody there?
That's a good question, and I guess that remains to be seen. Um, I I feel like the reason why they kept the reservations for so long is because they've been so busy that it would be bad optics if they got rid of them. So, I mean, I think it would be a completely valid argument of, I went to Magic Kingdom, everything was an hour wait if you didn't have Genie Plus, and now you're telling me you don't even need a reservation anymore. I think that they kept on trying to put that off. Um, but when it comes to change, sometimes it can be painful. But I can't imagine a guest wanting the reservation system. I've never, there's debate back and forth about things like Genie Plus or if the dining plans are worth it, but no one's ever said like, I love this whole reservation thing. And honestly, I don't think it had much meaning. Like, I don't think it had a meaningful impact on their business. I don't think it helped much with forecasting or anything like that because um if I can go to,
Hmm.
Epcot, they have no idea if I'm gonna park hop to Magic Kingdom or Animal Kingdom or anything like that. They just have no idea. So you can't really use it for forecasting either. I think that in the bygone days of COVID, when they could only have a few tens of thousands of people in the park from a legal standpoint, it made perfect sense. But nowadays, I think it's lost all meaning, and it was intended for crowd control, but they got so much pushback from the guests that they made it a shell of its former self. Now, from a cast member standpoint, I have no idea. I've never been a cast member. Um, they probably have the optic that it's going to be busier and less predictable, but I mean, it, for a lot of the jobs at the parks, whether it's very busy like it normally is or extremely busy like it is during, Christmas to New Year's that week, does it really affect your job? Like, does it matter if there's an extra 5 or 6,000 people in the park? Probably not.
I'd say not so much your job, but maybe the questions that you get asked that you're expected to know.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong, they still made sure to make this kind of a mess. Like, they're adding, okay, so this is some of the caveats. So for single day tickets, you just essentially don't need a reservation anymore. Um, they're adding good to go days for annual pass holders, and I'm guessing cast members too, from the context of what you're saying. I hadn't heard that, but that sounds like it makes sense. But essentially, you can show up anytime, no reservation, depending on the park. The information on the good to go days is going to be added into the My Disney Experience app as well as their website. Then now you still have to make a reservation if you're an annual pass holder, but once you go to the park, you don't have to wait till 2 in order to park hop to another park. And the exception for that is Saturdays and Sundays at Magic Kingdom. So, with Magic Kingdom, you still have to do essentially a reservation like you normally would on weekends because they're just so darn busy there. So, they didn't entirely get rid of the reservations. It's still there. It's still relatively complicated, but I feel like most people that have annual passes are usually in tune enough to like kind of pay attention. I'd be far more worried about the individual ticket people. Like, how many times did they have a family of 5 that bought a 10-day ticket that showed up from Washington or Arizona or whatever and didn't have a reservation, and they were initially told they couldn't come in. I bet that was a thing, you know?
Oh, exactly, with that, and I did hear that was a thing. Now, when you're going to Walt Disney World vacation, supposed to be a relaxing type of a thing, have fun with the family. Um, the last few years, it's been very complicated. A lot of stress trying to plan your Disney, visits. When can we go to the park? When can't we go to the park? And I think it just became so stressful. A lot of people, just held off.
Mhm.
So I think this is going to be a good thing to get a lot of those, people to come back to Walt Disney World because now it's, getting back to what it used to be. We're very easy to plan your visits. Now we're talking about Walt Disney World, dropping the reservations and that, but out, west Disneyland, California, they're going to be different than Walt Disney World, and they're still going to have park reservations for now.
Yep. Yeah, and, their park keys, I think they call it, which is their version of annual pass, is not always on sale. It's a completely different situation out there. The vibe that I get, and no one's told me this, especially nobody within Disney, but the vibe that I get is that they almost well, the annual pass holder is almost like a nuisance at that point because the demand is so high that really the last thing that they need is somebody that didn't have to buy a ticket that day getting in. And a good thing that makes that evident is that, like, I think like a week before Christmas, like maybe a week before Christmas going into the new year, there is not a tier of pass that will get you into Disneyland, and they're still packed to the gills, you know? So
Oh yeah.
but, on that same token, there are a lot of parks out there that will sit there and, they'll go crazy trying to sell you a season pass or an annual pass for a few months of the year, and then when it comes to redeeming it, you're seen as a nuisance. At Disney World, they don't exactly make it easy to get an annual pass too, so it's kinda like, if you want it, you gotta kinda pursue it, which I respect that, but, Disneyland, they made it really difficult to buy a pass, but I don't see that changing anytime soon. In fact, I would be disappointed, and I think that it would make very major negative news, but I could see them just not having annual passes. I could see them ending the program, you know? Just let the people that have them now keep on renewing them. Eventually, they'll all fall off and, everyone buys tickets and then reintroduce them when we go into the next recession and you need people again.
That's a possibility, I think. Disney, they've teased the Genie
Mhm.
Plus would be changing. What are your thoughts on that? And what would you like to see out of Genie Plus as a annual pass holder to Walt Disney World?
So I buy Genie Plus almost every time I go. It really is the difference between being able to have fun and not being able to have fun. And there are arguments that Genie Plus being as inexpensive as they make it sometimes is responsible for the extraordinarily long standby times. But with that being said, the Genie Plus stuff, I would there's a couple things that would like to have. Um, I would like to have the ability to book more than one at a time, more than one experience at a time. And it's not necessarily right now. One of the big secret, there's some sort of caveat in there where something like Slinky Dog Dash or Frozen or Ratatouille, where if you try at 9 in the morning, sometimes the next time is at 7 p.m. And there's some sort of like 2 or 4 hour window where you can still book during the day, but it would be nice where it's like, okay, s- you set your alarm for 7 a.m., you book Mickey's Runaway Railway. It'd be cool if you could be like, "Okay, 45 minutes later, we can do Twilight Zone Tower of Terror." Like, just to plan your day a little bit more. I don't know if that's the plan because I feel like that would be working against the problem that they're having where it's too many Genie Plus and not enough standby as far as the inventory of the line is concerned. But that from a consumer standpoint, that's something I'd really like. Another thing that I would like to see is like a standby option for Genie Plus. So if you don't book Ratatouille first thing in the morning, you're done. Like you're not going to get it. It'll be sold out. But to be able to put yourself on a wait list where you can at least be informed of like, hey, this time opened up at 6:25 p.m. Are you interested? That would be kind of nice, but that might be a technological limitation. But those are the only two things I can think of. The reality is it's underpriced for what it is, and too many people buy it. It needs to be probably priced more so for value or for scale rather than value. So it's not like a half the park has it. That would probably solve a lot of their problems, but create other problems, of course.
What are some of the other rides from your experience that you have to make sure you lock in right away when you get there? You're not going to be able to do it. You're going to miss out.
Yeah, so Ratatouille that's if you don't do that at 7 a.m., you're not getting it. Slinky Dog Dash is another very hit or miss one where you can sometimes get it, but it's going to be 5 hours into the future. Um, what are some other ones? Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway sometimes gets like that. All these rides are worth the wait, by the way. They're all like, just incredible rides, but it's not their Test Track. That's another one that it often sells out, and it's just and it's funny because you would think that if a Genie Plus sold out, it would mean that it's so busy. But I bet you there are days when it's raining or it's like a Monday in the off season, and it's just not very busy. I bet you Ratatouille still sells out by 9 a.m. It's just the capacity's not there.
You mentioned Slinky Dog. What are your thoughts on that as a coaster? It's one of my favorites. What about you?
So I've ridden it twice, and both were really bad experience. Well, okay, they weren't really bad experiences. The first one was kind of funny. We sat in the front row, and we couldn't see anything because Slinky Dog's giant head was so big that we couldn't see anything. Uh, and then the second time we rode it, and I'll put the photo up here. Is this was a couple weeks ago. We rode it during a tropical storm, and it's like us pulling our head, our ponchos down over our heads. So that was kind of miserable, but an honest opinion is I think it's a adorable ride. It's so fun. Slinky Dog is every like little toddler's favorite character, by the way. And then it's voiced by Jim Varney, God rest his soul. What more could you ask for?
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. Like I said, one of my favorites at the Walt Disney World resorts. Another one of my favorites that I like is, the Big Thunder Mountain.
Mhm. So, I do enjoy Big Thunder Mountain. The thing that I don't like about it is when it comes down to it, it's a roller coaster, and you can kinda get that anywhere. Now, granted, like, there's more to the story than that. But I go
Yeah.
to Disney looking for dark rides, but what I will say, my favorite part of Big Thunder Mountain is when you get towed up the hill, like, the second lift hill, and the track is, like, bobbing back and forth. I think that's, like, so cool.
Yeah, I enjoy that. What about for you? If you have the choice, you got to pick one or the other, Tower of Terror, or you can ride Haunted Mansion. Which one are you going to do?
Tower of Terror. It's the best ride that's ever existed. You
Yeah, I
should have
mean,
just
it's
stopped when
I
you asked
go
Tower of
back and
Terror.
forth. No, I go back and forth on which one of those I like better. Can never get enough for me of Haunted Mansion. I always see something different every time I ride it, and I've got over 100 rides on that, and every time to me it just feels like a different experience because I'm catching something I didn't before. But it's the same thing with Tower of Terror. It's never the same experience twice for me.
It's so I've ridden Haunted Mansion probably about 10 times now, with the vast majority of that being within the last 6 months. Um, and I love Tower of Terror. Like, I am not ragging on Tower of Terror. I'm sorry, Haunted Mansion. I love Haunted Mansion. But Tower of Terror at its worst is a really good ride. But remember, the ride program itself is randomized, at least to a degree. And I've had some ones that are just so good. And the best part of that whole ride from a
Hmm.
thrill standpoint is that you lock into that elevator shaft, and it doesn't matter if this is your first ride or if this is your 100th ride, you do not know if you're going up or down. And that's just like, that'll get you every single time because you cannot prepare for it. It's not like a big drop versus a little
No,
drop. It's not a little shoot up versus a big shoot up. You're either going to shoot up or you're going to shoot down, and you cannot prepare for both. And I think that is just insane.
yeah, that's another thing I love about it. Like I said, it's never the same ride twice. And I really like the theming of it. Even if the line's, out into the midway a little bit, it's still, something to see as you're going through the queue. Then you get inside and just, a lot of different things to see, the attention to detail. Uh, the cast members, they're very much into their
Mhm.
role, all of those things. So just a great experience. If you have not done Tower of Terror, what are you
Yeah,
waiting for? You got to
exactly.
do it.
Room for one more. No, should we should we mix up the two IPs and say There's 999 happy haunts in this elevator, but there's room for it. Hey, Don, since they added the Hatbox Ghost, are there now 1,000 happy haunts in the Haunted Mansion? So there is no longer room for one more?
That's a good question, but maybe they took something out.
Yeah, that's true.
No, I think that storyline. I mean, it is the backstory. It is really, again, just so well done. That's what you get when you go to Walt Disney World or Disneyland. Just that attention to detail, the backstories, the theming. Um, it's just an experience that you don't get anywhere else. You don't, granted, they don't have the big, the giga coasters or anything like that. So some people rule it out. They don't want to go because it doesn't have all those big roller coasters. But it's not about that. It's about all the storytelling. And it just, you always go to, for me, it was always going to the park to get away from like the everyday life. You definitely are immersed into another world when you're at Walt Disney World.
Oh, yeah, and that's the one thing that always gives Disney the edge over Universal for me. Like, Universal has these poignant moments where it's like, that's better than anything at Disney, and, like, obviously, like, the Bourne Stunt Show, like, Disney doesn't have anything like that, but with Universal, it's just not constructed with the separation in mind. Because you can, like, see the road from the top of the rides and stuff, which are things that Disney World was never designed to have, because of, the famous story of when Walt was talking about with Disneyland, how he saw people hopping on the sky ride to see how bad traffic was, and then they would leave if the traffic started backing up, and that's neither here nor there. Don, your favorite kingdom or your favorite park at Walt Disney World is Magic Kingdom. What's your second favorite park?
My second favorite park is Hollywood Studios.
See, that used to be mine too until recently, and then Epcot has edged it out.
I like Epcot, for the different events that they have.
Mhm,
I think some of the food there, is just off the charts good.
mhm.
But in terms of just, if I'm going to spend a full day, the other two parks, I'd rather be there than Epcot for a full day.
Yeah, it's not that Hollywood Studios diminished on me, it's that Epcot grew on me, and I loved Epcot from the beginning. It's just as once you buy your annual pass and we make bros trips down there, you'll understand that when yeah,
No, I mean, I like it. I love it.
well,
I mean,
no,
it's
no, I'm
great.
saying
But
that
if,
there's
when you're down there and you've got a choice,
but the perspective changes.
if the choice is there, I'm taking.
But when you have an annual pass, you don't have to make that choice, is what I'm saying. You've got all day, and it doesn't really matter because you've got that flexibility, and you can come back next month if you want to. But that's where Epcot comes in because that's when it's like, you don't have to ride every ride. So, I never really got to poke around in the German pavilion. What's this Japanese video? Like, there's just so many caveats there. Plus, it's like, it's such a darn weird park with like, come on, the Land Pavilion, that reminds me of a mall from the '90s, like, I mean, come on, that's so cool, but
Yeah, I mean, it's a unique experience, and it's a must do if you're going there for the first time. You definitely have to do Epcot. But just for me, like I said, for the time that I'm there, if I'm going to be spending 4 or 5 days there or just a weekend there, you know, definitely going to hit Magic Kingdom, definitely going to hit Hollywood Studios, and then if I have that extra time, yes, Epcot, comes into the picture. But that's just me.
yeah, well, Hollywood Studios does have some rides that are kind of like, if you don't get to ride them, you're kinda missing out, you got your Tower of Terror and Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. Those are just 2 to name a few, I would say Star Wars, but I've only ridden that twice, so I'd be a little hypocritical to claim you have to ride that every time. But I really like the Muppet Vision and stuff. I really do just enjoy that. A lot of people just go in there for the air conditioning, but I think it's cool. I like the old
Yeah, but for the different festivals and that, you're not going to beat Epcot for that. I mean, I
no.
went, a few years ago. I wasn't thinking I was going to, walk out of there, thinking, this is an awesome event, but they had the Flower and Garden,
Mhm.
event that they had there. That was super impressive. And then all the photo opportunities that, it provided in that. So something that I was, planning to spend maybe a couple of hours there before I went back to Magic Kingdom, I ended up spending like 6 hours there. So there's things like that when they have the event, they have, the different food tasting, wine tasting, different events like that there. Um, those are fantastic. And for those kind of things, yes, Epcot would be, near the top right there for me at Walt Disney World.
So we need to settle this debate. So Magic Kingdom's out of the question because I feel like there's a lot of people where Magic Kingdom's their favorite park and they're never going to be budged off that. But besides Magic Kingdom, leave a comment on this video or tweet at us at attractions_GRP. What's your favorite park at Walt Disney World besides Magic Kingdom? And why is it Epcot? Or why is it Hollywood Studios or Animal Kingdom? Heck, throw in the water parks too. Typhoon Lagoon. If that's your favorite, let us know why. Let's settle this. Cool. Yeah, Don, do you have any final thoughts about the big changes going to Walt Disney World this in the next couple months?
It is so good. It is so good to see things getting back to normal. We see it in other things, but to see it at Walt Disney World, I think that's just a great thing, and it makes me excited to get back down to Orlando and visit Walt Disney World.
Yeah, I am too. Yep. The difference is I actually went through with getting my annual pass, and now I'm just waiting on you, Don. Okay. All right.
It's coming.
All right. Well, stick around. We got pick six coming up next.